Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the North and East Plans panel. My name is Councillor Caroline Gruen, and I'll be chairing today's meeting. Could I remind everyone that today's meeting is being live streamed on the City Council YouTube channel so that the public can observe the meeting without needing to be present. North and East Plans panel deals with applications from the North East and East of the city, and the aim of the panel is to hear all the relevant information from applicants, members of the public and council officers to help members of the panel make their decision. Could I now invite members and officers to introduce themselves, and could I ask if you could mute your microphone when you've done so? So I've introduced myself and we'll go this way around, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Glenn Allen, Principal Planning Officer for the North East of Leeds.
Good afternoon, I'm Lisa Brannan, Principal Engineer, Highways.
Good afternoon, Councillor Elizabeth Nash, Hunslet and Riverside Ward.
Afternoon, Councillor Nicole Sharpe, the Temple Newsham Ward.
Good afternoon, Emma Flint from Wheatwood Wood.
Good afternoon, Councillor Mirelle Midgley, Kippax and Methley Ward.
Good afternoon, Daniel Almas, Senior Technical Officer.
Good afternoon, Toby Russell, Senior Technical Officer.
Good afternoon, everybody. Councillor Dan Cohn from the Audley Ward.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Alan Lamb, I represent the Wetherby Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Barry Anderson, Adlin Wharfdale Ward.
Afternoon, Seamus Core, Landscape Officer.
Good afternoon, Debbie Oldham, Clerk to the panel.
Pippa Plumtree Varley, Principal Legal Officer and Advisor to the panel today.
Good afternoon, Jonathan Carr, Head of Development Management.
Hello, David Newbury, Lead Planning Officer for the Plans panel.
Could I ask the clerk now to take us through agenda items 1 to 5, please?
Thank you, Chair. So under agenda item 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Under agenda item 2, there is an intention for the meeting to go into private session as appendix 1 of agenda item 9, which is the single story side extension at the Lodge, Newsham Green Road, is designated as confidential under part 4F of the Council's Constitution and provision of access to procedure rule 9.2. Under agenda item 3, I'm not aware of any late items of business. Under agenda item 4, could I ask members to declare any interests? And I don't see any. Thank you very much. Under agenda item 5, apologies have been sent and received from Councillor Stevenson, and Councillor Cohen is in attendance as his substitute today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Welcome, Councillor Cohen. Thank you very much for substituting today. And can we turn to the minutes of the last meeting? And could I thank Councillor McKenna in his absence for chairing that meeting on that occasion. Can I ask if the minutes are a correct record, please? Any matters arising? I don't see any hands, so I think we can move straight on. Thank you. So on to item number 7, and in your own time, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for planning permission with a recommendation to refuse for a single-storey rear extension to the rear of number 532 to 534 Scott Hall Road. The application has been reported to Plans Panel because we received a request from a local ward council that complied with the council standing orders for referrals to Plans Panel, and the councillor wishes to express their support for the development. The proposal is for a single-storey rear extension, and there are only really a few principal issues. As you'll know from the report that has been, can I move the slide forward, please? Okay. As you know from the site visit this morning, the application site relates to a double retail unit that's at the end of a row of single-storey units on Scott Hall Road, as indicated on the location plan that's before members at the moment. I've got a few pictures to show the generality of the area, the actual application site is where it says liquid recovery on that particular slide. And members will note the boundary trees. This is the frontage and some of the activities that are taking place on the frontage on a fairly regular basis. The actual application site is in that photograph, the sign that's in orange, just to the far right of the William Hill property there. There's some photographs of the trees that are around the back, which will be relevant when I give my brief presentation on the merits of the proposal. As members will be aware from the report and the site visit this morning, the impact on these trees to the rear of the property are of significant concern to officers. And that's just some general views through the trees of the neighbour next door. So that's the site as it's laid out at the moment. There's a right of way to the south of the site, but that's pretty much blocked off. Every time I've visited the site to make an assessment of proposals on this site, that right of way would just not be accessible. But there's generally speaking a one-way system through the frontage of the site. The forecourt's accessed just off the roundabout as you're travelling south down Scott Hall Road. And because of the nature of the road being a dual carriageway where the vehicles can only turn left into it and right out of the site, there tends to be a bit of a one-way system. But as you can see, it's a fairly simple, nondescript building at present, and the proposed extension to the rear fits in with the form and character of that building. In terms of visual amenity, officers have no concerns because the location of it around the rear of the property. So in terms of the principle of development, and subject to detailed planning consideration, officers are quite comfortable with the principle of the development. And in respect of the design of the extension, again, largely because of its compliance with the nature of the existing building and its location, that there are no problems with the design. The report that members will have read, they'll now go into details about the potential impact on the neighbour's amenity. And there's only one real neighbour that could conceivably be affected by this, and they're to the south of the application site. And because of the nature of the building, the existence of a dense belt of planting, there's not considered to be any immediate amenity issues for occupiers of that property. We do have some concerns with respect to the proposal in terms of highways and the means of access. The only way to access the rear is from the north of the access way just off Scott Hall Road at the north end of the parade of shops. And there's an approximately 3-metre gap from the corner of the northernmost property to the boundary of the site, which has a concerns in terms of forward visibility, and certainly wouldn't allow 2 vehicles to pass going in opposite directions. So the major concerns from a highways point of view in terms of the impact that the development will have on highway safety. The other aspect which we're of concern about and is reflected in one of the reasons for refusal is the impact that the development will have on the trees. Now, we've got a plan here which is an extract from the submitted tree survey. And as members can see, the trees which surround the site are all impacted by the development in terms of the canopy coverage and, more importantly, the root protection area coverage. The problem that we see with this is that these trees will be adversely impacted, and many of them have still got quite long life expectancy. So in terms of carbon sequestration and their impact on the climate emergency declaration, their demise is not to be encouraged in our view. So it's on that basis that we've taken the approach that we think that this development, whilst it will have some relatively minor benefits in terms of possibly moving activity from the frontage to the rear, although that's not by all means 100% clear that it will actually do that. will actually have a greater adverse impact on matters of highway safety and impact on the existing trees to the rear of the property, and we recommend it for refusal as outlined in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there any questions to officers? We don't have any speakers on this item. Councillor Almas.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. I was just wondering, tree number three appears to be the biggest tree from what I see here. How far is it actually from the boundary, from the actual boundary of the building?
Could we perhaps go back to the
page 11?
Yes, that's it. Sorry, was you referring to T3? Yeah. I've got a colleague here from our landscape team who's the expert in this area. I'll hand over to him to answer that question.
I measure it off at 2 meters to the trunk from the back of this new extension. 2 meters, so very close. Thank you.
Any further questions to officers on this one? Councillor Nash.
I noticed that the servicing of vehicles is on the car park at the front of the parade. Has there been planning permission for this?
In short, no. But whether that's an ancillary activity to the main unit is something that we would need to discuss with legal as to whether it would actually need planning permission. It's not a straightforward, but the straight answer to your question is no.
I was interested in the comments from Highways on the site visit. I just wondered if you would like to comment on the access and entry point.
I think there's several issues with the proposed access around the rear. One is when I went on a site visit, there were cars parked at the entrance to there. So that would be one concern, that it's displacing parking onto the parade. Then there's a really right angle bend basically around the back of the building. So there's no forward visibility at all. The sort of the distance between the corner of the building, and there's posts where there's a telecoms equipment. So there's posts bollards sort of protecting that, and that's about a 3 meter gap. So there really is very little room to get any vehicle round there. You could get a vehicle round there, but there's no forward visibility. The track is not made up. It can't even really be described as a track. And there's a lack of clarity on what access rights they have for vehicles there. So we do have significant concerns if this proposal was to take that sort of vehicle servicing round the rear because of that unsafe access. And all the parade shops do have some kind of access to the rear, some of which might be forming emergency sort of exit. I think, you know, all in the round, we do have significant concerns about the proposal.
Any further questions? Comments, members? Councillor, yes.
Thank you, Chair, and can I thank Mr. Allen for a really helpful presentation. I've read the papers, I've listened to the Highways officer. And while I'm sure there will be other comments, I move that we accept the officer recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. I will ask for other comments and we'll come back to your proposal. Thank you. Any further comments on this application? Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I just formally second Councillor Cohen's proposal. I just make the comment as to I'm sure we've all had frustrations when officers haven't wanted to bring reports that we think should come to panel. I would perhaps ask for some clarification to what the basis was for this coming here, because it seems pretty clear to me, and it's whether this panel needed to make the decision. I would perhaps have a question about that, but I would certainly support Councillor Cohen's proposal.
Thank you for that. So we've got a proposer and a seconder. So can we vote for those in favour of the recommendation, please? So I think that is unanimous. Thank you very much, members. Thank you.
Clarify the reason why it was brought.
Councillor Nash.
Yes, I'd like an addendum to that. I would like it to be followed up about planning permission for servicing of vehicles in what is really a public space. I do not think that is acceptable.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Nash. We'll talk to our complaints team and we'll investigate the matter, and we'll inform you and the chair of the outcome.
Thank you. Just going to clarify the reasons for refusal.
Sorry, I was just going to clarify the point Councillor Lamb raised about the reasons for bringing it to plan panel is because it was requested of a ward member who wanted to support the local business and thought that the economic benefits outweighed the planning issues. Sorry.
Chair, I'm just going to make sure that's very clear so we all know the bar has been lowered significantly for what you need to ask for to bring an application to panel.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And just to explain, like all requests, we do consider it against the officer's scheme of delegation. And the key test is whether the ward member raises material planning considerations. And then secondly, whether those material planning considerations go wider than the impact on immediate neighbours. And because of what Councillor Dowson has raised, in terms of the broader material planning considerations, then it comes to plans panel. Right. Okay.
Can we now move to the next agenda item, please? Thank you, Seamus.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. This is an appeal decision summary that we're bringing to panel for information, really. It's a development proposal which has been quite long in the consideration and determination. The original application to which this appeal decision relates to was actually debated at length by the North and East Plans panel on the 13th of August in 2020. The recommendation of the officers at that time was to, on balance, approve the development. And following the debate that took place at that plans panel meeting, there was a decision to defer and delegate the decision to officers so that we could negotiate hopefully further with the developers to improve a particular relationship of the development with the next door neighbour's property. The applicants flatly refused to negotiate further with us at that point in time and asked us to determine the application as submitted. And so on the basis of the concerns of plans panel that had been expressed, the application was actually refused and the developer appealed that decision. And this is the summary of the outcome of that appeal. The development is for could we move the slides forward, please? Is for a scheme on an area of land which, under the old unitary development plan, was actually allocated as green space, and so had a high level of protection afforded to it simply by that designation. Under the adoption of the core strategy and more specifically the site allocations plan, the site was looked at again as to its contribution towards green space provision, and largely because it's under private ownership and is unlikely to come into the public realm, and also the fact that there was the perceived to be sufficient green space in the local area already, that protection was removed, and to all intents and purposes the site became what we would refer to as white land. It had no particular designation. So in the sense that it's a green field, it is there as open space, but in terms of the designation and the protection that the local plan would afford it, at the time of the application, that had actually been removed. The proposal was for a building which was in the format of a H footprint, as you can see in the top left-hand corner of that drawing there, and was for the provision of 58 units of accommodation for 55 plus occupiers. So the recommendation that was made in terms of approval was to be tied in with a legal agreement and conditions that would limit the age range of the occupiers that could occupy the premises. The appeal inspector considered that there were essentially three key areas that he needed to determine the appeal on. The first one was the character and appearance of the area with due regard to the green infrastructure. The second was the living conditions of nearby residents with regards to privacy, outlook and light. And the third item was the supply of housing, and in particular with regards to the fact that the scheme seek to provide a particular age range of housing provision targeting the 55 age plus. If we can just go back to the location plan. Taking the living conditions of the nearby residents first, sorry, taking them out of order, but this was one of the hot topics of the discussion and debate that was held by members at the August plans panel. It's the property to the left of the inset of the red line area there that was of particular concern. It's a little cottage property which has got a commercial frontage with the living accommodation to the rear, as members can see on that plan, but as can also be seen on that location plan, which perhaps wasn't as apparent when you're looking at it on site. They do have a very generous garden, and the appeal inspector took the view that the location of the side wall of the proposed building, with the safeguards that had been negotiated anyway, which was the removal of windows serving habitable rooms, largely in line with that building being removed. There were only windows to things like bathrooms and staircases that can be obscurely glazed. That there was actually going to be no loss of privacy sufficient to justify a refusal of planning permission to the occupiers of that residential property. That there would no doubt be a change to the outlook from that garden, but as members will be aware, nobody actually has a right to review under the planning system. So the inspector considered that wasn't a justifiable reason for refusal in that instance. In terms of the character and appearance of the area with due regard to the green infrastructure, the appeal inspector agreed that it was correct for the council to consider that, notwithstanding that the provision of its statutory protection under the adopted local plan had been removed, but that it was still a material consideration, but considered that the benefits that the development would bring in terms of biodiversity improvement and in particular the supply of housing to the 55 plus age range outweighed that particular harm as identified. That was also a key consideration in another aspect of this appeal, which was that the appellants applied for costs against the council, arguing that we had acted unreasonably as a local authority in considering green space as a consideration. And the appeal inspector dismissed that part of the appeal, and we didn't actually get costs awarded against us. But I think from our point of view and as a learning point, that's a validation of the fact that when officers bring cases to members and members raise these issues and discuss them and debate them, they're within their rights to do that and make reasoned decisions on those bases without fear of having costs awarded against the council. And then the final point really was that in terms of the supply of housing overhaul, it would be a good windfall contribution to the 5-year housing land supply, but specifically again it made reference to the 55 plus housing market niche, and that it would provide a significant contribution towards a need there. So those are the points I think in summary that the report tries to bring out, and hopefully not an ideal to lose an appeal, but certainly not a bad outcome overall.
Thank you very much indeed. We have to formally note and receive this. Are there any questions or comments anybody would like to make in the light of that presentation, or any previous members of the panel who were present at the time would like to comment?
The only thing I would say is this was done online, and when we saw it on site today, it was different than the one-dimensional drawings that we saw, and you could see some of the points that the inspector was making. But because, I mean, for example, when you look at the picture there, it does look as though the pitch next to it is of the same character as the area of land that's there. And I think, to the best of my knowledge, I think Councillor Nash actually did go on site. So I think she had the benefit at the time, but I don't think the rest of us visited it on site in our own time. So I'm not saying that's the reason why we made the decision, but it was far more apparent when we saw it today than my recollection as to when we discussed it online. And it must have been about one of the first applications we just looked at online after COVID, to be quite frank. But that's not an excuse. I'm just stating as a
helpful perspective. Thank you for putting that in context. Any more comments? Councillor Nash?
I think that shows the importance of site visits. Unfortunately, this morning I wasn't on a site visit because I didn't get the notification. I don't know whether it was my computer or not, but I didn't get it. I did visit the site because I knew it was online, and I'm not polishing up my halo, but I did support the officer's recommendation at the time. And that was just because I had been on the site visit and seen what was what.
Thank you. I would like to say lessons learned, but we didn't have a choice, did we, when it was all virtual? So we had to get on with the job. But thank you for that context. Is everybody happy then to note and receive that that result? Thank you very much indeed. And can I ask panel members now just to take 2 or 3 minutes break while I explain to the applicant the procedure for the next item? The meeting. So can we proceed now with item 9, please?
Thank you, Chair. Have we got the presentation? Just me. I don't look a lot like an extension, but I can try. Yep, right. Right, lovely. Thank you, members. For those that were on the site visit this morning, this is, sorry, for those that weren't on the site visit this morning, this gives you a general context. I'll take you through some site photographs and then we'll just take a quick look at the plans. So the application relates to this property here, which is a small lodge building, which is an historic from about 1860 property, which serves as the entrance marker to this larger listed building, grade 2 star, and the ancillary buildings. These are all now dwellings. Move the next slide. It was doing it a second ago, but thank you. So this is just a slightly closer shot. The extension is into this space here. You can see there's no immediate neighbours around to be affected. Next slide, please. This is a view of the property taken from the roadside. We can just move on. This is actually the principal elevation of the property. So actually it's almost its side elevation is the critical elevation, because this was originally the access into the listed hall. So you're picking up on this elevation, the portico, sort of neoclassical portico, which references the Palladian design of the listed building. Can we move on again, please? This is just moving around the property. So that's the principal elevation. You've just seen the end of there. This is the rear elevation. It's an existing conservatory. And if we could just move on again. Thank you. That's the conservatory's other side. And this is where the extension is going. It follows the form of this existing outbuilding, which is an historic outbuilding, becomes a little bit wider, and then runs into this space here as a single-story structure. So just move on. And this is just giving a wider context shot. Again, you can see where the extension is being tucked in behind here. There are two main issues, which I'll just talk about while we're looking at this slide, because it's a useful slide, which is the impact of the development upon the green belt and the impact upon the listed building. I'll take the listed building first. Members can see the character of the building. It's formed from the fact it's single story, the detail, for instance, the eaves overhang, the sills, the decorative window surrounds, and the very gabled form. The extension will replicate this form, and the scale of the extension is such that it won't harmfully change its appearance as an ancillary subordinate lodge house. The other key issue is the green belts. Members can see the property has already been quite extensively extended. The original building is that element there, and the secondary gable running back. So all this section here, this link addition, and the conservatory and this outbuilding are all extensions. Taken cumulatively with the new addition, it is inappropriate development within the green belt, which has the policy consequences of being, we have to take that as causing harm, and we have to give it substantial weight. Those within the papers are aware that we consider the personal circumstances of the applicant do outweigh that harm in this instance. Just to move on, just take a brief look at, sorry, next slide. Thank you. So in floor plan terms, this is the extension here, forming a bedroom. This is the extension in the elevation. That was that sort of slide we were lingering on. And the extension here. That's the bit you can see that just juts out slightly beyond the existing gable. And perhaps if members do wish to discuss the application, this is quite a nice slide to linger on. You're showing the area currently on site and the extension just as a 3D form. Happy to take questions.
Okay, before I invite questions, As you will have seen, there is a confidential pink paper pack with this item. So I need to ask you, would you like to go into private confidential debate about any aspect of that pink paper, or are you happy to stick to the public paper for your discussion? Would you like to indicate if you want private discussion? No, nobody wants that. That's fine. That's fine. So could I invite questions, please? Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if permission was granted on the basis of special circumstances, could that possibly leave the door open for future development on that site? Or is it just taken as this one application under the special circumstances, then any possible future applications would be judged that this location was in the green belt?
Yes, the nature of any very special circumstance case is that it has to kind of be unique to that development. If it could be replicated either on another application on this site or on future applications, it wouldn't be very special. It would be kind of general, really. So we don't believe this is setting any kind of precedence. It is the balance of the very unique factors in this particular instance for this particular extension. So even if, because the report does identify that there was a listed building application about 3 or 4 years ago for an extension in a very similar location, which is going to form a kitchen. That we wouldn't support because there were no very special circumstances. So that hopefully gives you some comfort that even if a very similar development came, but for a different reason, it would be inappropriate, but there wouldn't be that balancing of the personal circumstances.
Are you satisfied with that explanation? Any further questions? Yes.
Well, I have to say, I'm concerned about the current mess that this listed building is in at the moment. I mean, there's been various extensions, and how they got planning permission in the first place, I don't know, but we are where we are. I'd just like to ask a question on the proposed new bedroom. If you want to bring up the plan, it does jut out. I know there's a scale here, but I can't work out that scale. Could it not be in line with the bathroom, so that you know, you're looking straight down and not seeing a further jutting out bit?
Right, but my suspicion, and I haven't asked that question directly of the agent, the amount it's jutting out would be approximately 300 millimetres. It's approximately a wall thickness. Yes, I think so. Sorry, Councillor, I'm not used to that conversion. My suspicion is that because the extension is designed to meet a particular need, that size is determined by that information. Again, quite often we do see on plans a lot of detail showing, for instance, where items within a room will be positioned. In this instance, that detail isn't there. Again, it's to do with the kind of very sensitive nature of that. If that's a significant concern, I could pose that question to the agents. So members could, for instance, defer and delegate for that question to be asked. But one comment I would make, which is that from a character perspective, actually having it be slightly different and slightly, if it followed as a run on from that historic, because that's where it's coming from and that is an historic store. So if it then runs on, you suddenly got one element of the building which is very long and very narrow, which could look disproportionate to the main building. And even in its original form, there were various gables. So this is almost replicating that sense of another element, another gable. And from my perspective, and that's the conservation officer, the additional gable doesn't cause harm. I do take your point, Councillor, but I think on balance, having it tie in may be more harmful overall.
You can come back in the debate if you'd like to do that. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Mitchell.
Thanks, Chair. Can I just ask the previous planning history on page 49? Is that applications made by the current applicants?
The most recent, the sort of last but one application for the kitchen extension, that was, I believe, the same applicants. But the other other applications, it's the history of the building, not the history of the applicants. I know those date back to previous individuals that lived in that property.
Any further questions, please? Comments then? Councillor Cohen.
This probably won't surprise anybody. I'd like to commend officers for, again, for the report and for taking a really sensible, pragmatic approach. I'm personally very content in the special circumstances. Colleagues around the table will know I have gone to battle on Greenbelt on many an occasion. I do not easily give way on anything that is Greenbelt, but there are very special circumstances here. And in light of that, Chair, I move.
Thank you, Councillor Cohen. Anyone else with comments before I move to that? Councillor Anderson.
Again, and a similar point to Councillor Cohen, I have a reputation for fighting against anything on Greenbelt, but I am satisfied that on this occasion, I do think the special circumstances have been made.
Any further comments? Councillor Nash.
I didn't realise we're on special on comments. Yeah, I take your point about special circumstances, but my main concern is that this is a listed building, and quite frankly, it looks a mess with all those extensions, with that flat roof extension. Who agreed to that? I should like to know. But we are where we are, as I've said. In my view, if the new bedroom could be in line with the bathroom, I think it would help to stop that added on look. That's what this lodge has. It's just been add on and add on and add on. But if you say that because of the circumstances, that size of bedroom is required, then I'm happy to go along with that. But I really am disappointed that in the past planning permission has been given for all these various add-ons.
Thanks, Councillor Nash, and I absolutely take your point. So I think we can delegate officers to ask some of those questions and see if any of those adjustments can reasonably be made. And as you say, we are where we are. We can't go back in history. Yes.
By the way, sorry, the officer said it's 300 metres, 300 centimetres, and I said, oh, a foot. Actually, on the plan, it says 500 centimetres, which is half a metre.
Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I'm going to formally second Councillor Cohen's motion. My comment in addition, I take Councillor Nash's points on board about the current state of the building, but that's not what we're here to deal with. I think I disagree actually about, I take the officer's point. I think it looks better in the context of the building as it is to have it slightly not too linear. I think it will look stranger as a long straight line than, but that's a matter of judgment, isn't it? So and yeah, as Councillor Cohen says, we can't redesign by committee here. So I similarly, with all my backgrounds, instinctively against development in the green belts, but having carefully considered the special circumstances, to my mind, it absolutely outweighs any harm, and therefore I'm seconding the proposal.
Well, thank you. I would like an opportunity to express a view and make a comment as well. My feelings very much echo those that have already been expressed about the special circumstances, which I believe trump all other issues in this context. So I'm happy to take the proposal for the recommendation. Okay, and the seconder. All those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed, colleagues. Summarise for us, David.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to confirm then that members have resolved to grant planning permission, and that's subject to the conditions set out on page 47 of the report. Just to note that the applicant will need to make an application for listed building consent. So it's not the end of the administrative process as it were. And if members are content, we'll deal with that at a delegated level.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that brings us to the end of our business today. Thank you very much for coming in and for making those decisions. Thank you very much for your contributions, and see you next time. Thank you.